Good morning, boys and girls, or good afternoon, depending on when you do this lesson. Today, we're going to start measurement, our chapter on measurement, and that is chapter 11. And we start with the Am I Ready page. You just watched the video and maybe some brain pop videos also. So, am I ready to start measuring things? I think you all are ready to start measuring things, for sure. You can start with the addition and subtraction problems, number 1, 2, and 3. Remember, with subtraction, we always ask, think about it for a minute, top number bigger than the bottom number? That's how you decide if you need to regroup. So make sure you pay close attention to the signs and whether or not you're going to be regrouping. All right, so we're going to start out by measuring the length of object in cubes. You don't have your cubes at home, but you can look at the picture and count the cubes, and that's about how long those objects would be. Okay, and then down at the bottom you have Neil's hand is 5 cubes long. He measures this checkerboard. It is 3 hands long. How many cubes long is the checkerboard? So if each hand is 5 cubes and there are 3 hands, think about it for a minute. Then you have 5 3 times. What addition problem would solve that? Okay, so think about that for a minute and see if you can figure it out. And then, after your parents check this for you, if you get them all right, you can color in all the cubes. If not, go back and get a little extra help on what you may have gotten wrong. Okay, boys and girls? So if you need to, shut the video off and go over the page, do what you need to do, and then move on when you are ready. Okay. Now, we're going to be looking at some vocabulary, okay? Review vocabulary, and you have the word compare. Think about that for a minute. Finding ways that things are different and the same. And then you have longest and shortest. Remember, we know that EST suffix. When we see EST, it means that we're comparing things. How many things are we comparing? 3 or more, that's correct. So it says to find 3 classroom objects. Well, you're not in your classroom. So you're going to find 3 objects in your house. All right, write them down and compare them. Write the one that's the longest, the one that's the shortest. Okay? And how did you compare your objects? All right, how did you decide which one was longer, which one was shorter? And then what I want you to do is I want you to write a complete sentence with a capital letter and period answering the question, how did you compare your objects? Now the next couple of pages are vocabulary cards. I don't want to do all of the vocabulary all at once. All right, so we will come back to these and you can use them to quiz yourselves. All right, boys and girls, we're going to start off our first lesson right now. And we're going to be talking about inches. Right, inches are a basic unit of measurement. They were invented a long, long time ago. And how we use inches is if you look at page 645, all right, you can see that the items on this page are very big or very small. Yeah, they're kind of small. So you know that you use inches to measure things that are on the small side, not the big side. If you go to the shoe store back in the olden days, right, I don't know if they still do it, but the person would measure your foot. They would have you stand up and they have that little measuring thing and they would press it up against your toe, and that's how they would figure out what size shoe you would need. Okay, so do you think that you would measure your foot, even though we call it a foot, in inches? If you said yes, then you are correct. You would definitely measure your feet in inches. All right, so the directions are to take a look at each item, okay, and see if you can figure out how many inches long each item is. All right, at this point, hopefully you have a ruler, and you're just going to measure these items in your book. Not everybody has a hockey puck laying around, so measure the items in your book. Alrighty. Okay, moving on. 1 inch is about the length of one color tile. You can use what you know about inches to estimate the length of an object. Then use an inch ruler to measure the length. Okay? Now, the problem with this chapter, and I face it every time I teach it, every year, is that all of these items are not in the classroom, and all of these items are not in your house. Okay? So what I do when I'm in the classroom is I ask the students to find different items in the room. And it's actually a fun activity. It's like a scavenger hunt. And I send them around the room with a ruler, finding these different items, measuring them, and recording them. So what I'm going to do is have your parents do that with you. And on a separate paper, write down the item that they asked you to measure and what length, how many inches long it was, because we're just using inches right now. So for example, they could say, go measure the length of the, let me think about that for a minute. Something small that would be less than 12 inches. Go measure the length of the picture frame on the coffee table. There you go. So you take your ruler and you hold it up against the picture frame and you measure. When you get started, your parents are going to help you. All right, I'm going to grab a ruler and show you what I mean. When you measure something, you hold the ruler up against the item that you're going to measure. So if I were measuring this box here, I hold it right up here against the edge. I don't start at 1, I hold it on the edge. And that is 5 inches long. Now, when you measure things, you're going to find that they're not always exactly 4 inches or 5 inches. So just go to the closest inch. Okay, if it's closer to 5, you say 5. All right. So here I have 5 inches, and then if I were measuring both of the boxes, okay, it's actually 10.5 inches. Okay, now we didn't get to halves yet. But if you look closely, you're going to see that it's just a little bit closer to 11 inches. But hopefully your parents are going to find items for you that are nice and easy to measure, especially when you're just getting started. Okay? So you're going to find about 5 items around the house that your parents give you, and you're going to measure them, and you're going to write down what they are. So for example, you would write picture frame, and then if you measured it, you would write 6 inches for the measurement. Okay, so take a few minutes and do that, and then you can come back to the video. Now, on the problem solving, okay, for example, number 1, Kaya's surfboard must be at least 15 inches longer than 48 inches. Should Kaya choose a surfboard that is 55 inches long or 65 inches long? Okay, it's a little challenging, all right? But it's more about the numbers, not about the measuring. So if you want to find something that's 15 inches long than 48 inches, are you going to add or are you going to subtract? If you said add, then you're correct. So you're going to add 48 and 15. And then you're going to look and see if that answer is closer to 55 or 65. Okay? If it's closer to 55, then the answer is 55 inches long. That's how long the surfboard should be. if it's closer to 65, then it should be 65 inches long. This is something that you might need a little bit of help with from your parents, okay? And then I think if you do number 9, that should be no problem at all. That should be pretty easy. And if you want to try the brain builder, you absolutely can do that. Now, we didn't talk about the word estimate. I wanted to come back to that. Do you remember what an estimate is? Well, an estimate is a guess, but it's not a random guess, like when you look at a jar of jelly beans and try to figure out how many jelly beans are there. It's what we call an educated guess. So if I said about how many inches long do you think your foot is, you wouldn't say 52 inches. Of course, you know your foot is smaller than that. You might say 6 or 7 inches. Okay? So when we look at the right math, I don't always have you do them, but I think you can answer, how are an estimate and an actual measurement different? And I'll give you a hint. If I were looking at these lines and I were going to estimate, I would say 14 inches. That's an educated guess. But if I were going to say actual measurement, then I would use my ruler. Okay? So see if you can write a sentence about that. All right? Now, for the homework, again, we're not going to be measuring the actual objects because not everybody has these objects in their house. Okay? So it's hard to see how that works. All right? But if you look over to the next page, page 650, all right, you definitely can do that. Find 2 objects, draw them, estimate the length, and then measure each object. And remember, if it's not exactly 6 inches or 7 inches, take it to whatever it's closest to. Okay? Then you can try the brain builder, and at the bottom, do the vocabulary check. Fill in the blank with the correct answer. All right, we just talked about estimate. We know about how long an inch is. All right, when we measure things, we find out how long or how big they are. And length means long, okay? So length usually would be up and down. And width, which is another word we didn't talk about yet, is how wide, okay? So I know that's a lot in a very short time, but it's what we're doing now, right? Because we're not all together. So I hope this helped, and I hope it helped your parents. And that's just our first lesson. I'll be doing one for each day of the week. All right, I'm out for now.